Good morning, everybody. Councilman.
This is our council president.
Madam President. Fire away, Jim.
Yep, good, excellent.
Come on down, guys.
Good morning. My name is Jim Gutton. I'm delighted to be here this morning. Just as background, I've worked in the New Jersey entrepreneurial community for nearly 25 years. Fortunate to have been with two terrific firms, Tech Council Ventures and Edison Partners. And during that time, I've seen and been involved with a number of outstanding New Jersey success stories. Dendrite, going back to the 1990s, Achieve 3000, Tabula Rasa, Bill Trust, Celgene, Axtria, a number of others. Moreover, having spent the first 10 years of my career in Silicon Valley, I know innovation and entrepreneurialism when I see it, which is why I was so delighted by Governor Murphy's Innovation Evergreen Fund. We face serious challenges in New Jersey. Despite one of the best educated, talent-rich workforces in the world, many promising startups and tech companies that otherwise would create tomorrow's jobs locate themselves outside our border. I gave a presentation last night at the Princeton Innovation Center Biolabs. Ed Nertz, an investment banker that I've known for 25 years, said he now has to go to Philadelphia to win business. Philadelphia and New York City have attracted our technology companies. The Innovation Evergreen Fund is the foundation for what is needed to bring those entrepreneurs, companies, and jobs back to New Jersey. Founders and entrepreneurs will come and stay in New Jersey if they see their business can be adequately funded and mentored by experienced, successful investors and advisors. For years, I've seen companies recruited away to Silicon Valley, Boston, Chicago, and elsewhere to obtain growth equity. Innovation Evergreen Fund provides New Jersey the level playing field necessary to attract and retain the best and the brightest. It is now my honor to introduce the visionary responsible for this transformative program, the esteemed Governor Murphy.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. Thank you. It's not every day you get called a visionary, so Jim, I hope we got that on tape. Thank you again all for joining us this morning here at the CCIT. Before I speak, I wanted to get a couple of things off my chest, and before I thank Jim, I want to talk about pirates and knights for a moment. Fairleigh Dickinson had a huge win last night against Prairie View, came from behind. They got the right, therefore, to play Gonzaga tomorrow. So go Knights. Seton Hall Pirates have Wofford, a little bit of an easier pick, I think we'd all agree. Not an easy one, but easier than Gonzaga tomorrow. So we want to give them, both of those squads, our very, very best and lots of passion to try to get some victories and keep going through the brackets. Jim, thank you for your opening remarks and for your support of New Jersey startups through Tech Council Ventures. And I hope we'll soon be coming together more and more often. And your tale of the talent and the money going to places like New York and Philadelphia and Northern California is the reason why we're here. We've turned our back on that for too long, and those days are over. Jim, in addition to you, I'm also honored to be joined by the Chief Executive Officer of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, the man to my right, really the visionary here, Tim Sullivan, and a guy, I don't know where we would be. I always say it takes a village to get things done in a state as it should. So no matter how good our ideas might be, or Tim's or Jim's passions, we need legislative partners, and there's none better than Assemblyman Andrew Zwicker, who's with us today, one of the leading thinkers and doers in our legislature and growing the innovation economy. I also want to give a shout out to North Brunswick's elected officials today. Madam Council President Guadagnino is here, as well as Councilman Andrews. So thank you both for being with us this morning. Please give Mayor Womack my best as well, and your fellow council members. So for the past year, our economic team has been reimagining New Jersey to be the place where entrepreneurs will come to turn their innovative ideas into reality. This is the state where the modern world in many respects was invented, at places like Menlo Park, Bell Labs, and Central Jersey's bio and pharma corridor. And New Jersey can be where the future takes shape again, at places just like this. For us to make this happen, we must build the innovation ecosystems and system that tomorrow's businesses will need to really kickstart our economy. A smartly crafted and strategically deployed series of incentives can help this ecosystem bloom. We have put forward that suite of programs, and a critical piece for capturing the startup economy is the Innovation Evergreen Fund. So let me just call a quick timeout and say the incentives that are currently on the books expire on June 30th. So beginning almost as soon as Tim got in office almost a year ago, we started baking the next generation of what those incentives we think should look like. As of, I think, pre-Christmas, we started to work with our legislative partners to try to craft them. There are 5 pillars. We're here to talk about one of them today. But as Andrew and I were just discussing, in many respects, it's the hardest one to get your mind around. It's the hardest one to understand. One of the pillars is directed at real estate development. We think it's a smarter one than the prior one, but it's a notion that our state is used to. Another one is directed at business development. Again, we think it's got some new bells and whistles that make it even better. And as Wayne Gretzky, when asked why he was so good, reminded us he goes to where the puck is going, not to where it's been. We've got a brownfields tax credit in a state that was ravaged by chemical companies with whole plots of land still undeveloped. Again, that's a concept that folks can get their mind around. And then the last pillar is the historical preservation tax credit. There's a federal tax credit. Most states have a state tax credit that goes alongside that brings back to life older buildings as opposed to plowing them down and only building new ones. And we think it's a game changer. So real estate development, business development, brownfields, historical preservation tax credit, those are the other 4 pillars. This one is a little bit more complicated, but we think this one is a game changer. And in many respects, it's unlike any other state has ever pursued, and we think it's a way that we can really kickstart both the venture capital return to New Jersey, as well as shrinking the gap between the big companies in this state and the startup culture. So you get one of those 1 + 1 = 3 opportunities. I mentioned Mayor Womack. He's with us. Mac, great to see you, sir. Thanks for having us here. So with that, I didn't mean to jump, pull back on that, but I want to make sure you understand where this fits in. So in 2007, New Jersey ranked 5th in the country in terms of total venture capital investments, roughly $1.3 billion. And that's a lot of money, period, but also when you whack up the amount of investments that would have yielded, because venture investments are by definition smaller in size. Over the ensuing 11 years, that was 2007, we not only dropped 10 spots, but the amount of venture capital finding its way annually into New Jersey startups has been cut in half. And by the way, I think Jim would agree with me, and Tim and Andrew, in the venture capital world in the United States, if you're not in the top 5, you might as well be 50. There are certain places where this money is going, and the gap between the haves and the have-nots is yawning. During that same period, when the venture capital money into New Jersey was cut in half over those 11 years, venture capital investments increased in our competitor states, like New York and Massachusetts. So it isn't that venture capital stopped flowing, it just flowed elsewhere, away from New Jersey. The Innovation Evergreen Fund is how we could bring this capital back to New Jersey. We could get it back by partnering with our startups and venture capital firms to help make the investments and help make their investments go even further. The Innovation Evergreen Fund will pair proceeds from a competitive auction of new state tax credits, typically going to be sold to large companies that have tax exposure in New Jersey, a one-time transaction, completely transparent. We'll pair the proceeds from that with private venture capital money, like those made by Jim and Tech Council Ventures, into a diverse array of New Jersey-centric and New Jersey-based startups. The auction winners, by the way, and this is the unique X factor here, won't be those who just give us the best price, although the price will be a factor. But it'll be the winners will be those who bring a commitment to work with us to grow the startup ecosystem through mentoring, networking, or other means. Tim and I spoke to a big corporate player yesterday, very jazzed about this. So they get to win if they pay us a good price for the tax credit that helps them shield their tax exposure, but we need more than that. We need to understand what their plan will be for care and feeding and getting involved in places like this, mentoring young STEM students, co-working spaces that they may provide, to pick some examples. This would be a partnership with both the businesses that we need to grow our economy with those believing in those businesses. We won't pick the investments, thank God. We'll follow the lead of our venture capital partners to ensure we focus on the businesses with the best plans for growth. Returns to the fund, by the way, would be reinvested to help grow other New Jersey-based startups. And if we do this right, additional returns could also be reinvested throughout the state budget in things like public education, in NJ transit, in an infrastructure generally, in workforce development, and in other things that we know that innovative businesses need. The Innovation Evergreen Fund is a natural next step for the collaborative partnerships the Economic Development Authority has formed with venture capital fund managers in the technology and life sciences communities across 2 decades. So the EDA is not new to this. And by the way, in terms of those relations investments, those which have nearly doubled the return on EDA's investments in venture capital funds. But in order for us to help build this partnership, we need to get the Innovation Evergreen Fund up and running. And we can do that, as I mentioned earlier, enacting it by June 30th, along with, I might add, similar timetable along with our budget. What is happening here at the CCIT is happening across New Jersey at incubators and co-working spaces in places like Jersey City, Homedale, Asbury Park, Kearney, in research laboratories at our colleges and universities, like in New Brunswick right down the street, and elsewhere. Let's become true partners with Jim and with our startups, many of whom are represented here, like the ones here at the CCIT. Let's ensure that these promising businesses don't just take their first steps here in New Jersey and then leave, but that they grow and stay in New Jersey. This is how we grow New Jersey into a dominant economic force. This is how we ensure that New Jersey will be the place where an entrepreneur will want to come to plant their roots. By the way, Wall Street Journal today, I think page A3, if I'm not mistaken, California's getting too expensive for folks to live in. We think it's expensive here. Go to Northern California. Greater Boston, expensive, running out of space. Bless their hearts, New York City. In many respects, we root for New York to do well because we're in the greater metropolitan area. But out of space, out of subway lines, and being priced out. That all works to our benefit. So we want to have the entrepreneurs, frankly, students go to college here, graduate from here, stay here, birth businesses, grow those businesses, grow up, grow old, grow successful. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Chief Executive Officer of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Tim Sullivan.
Thank you, Governor, for that very, very kind introduction. And you characterized everything about the plan so well that I'm leery of adding any comments for fear of detracting from them. But I just want to say a couple of things. One, welcome to CCIT. This is an EDA-run incubator and collaborative co-working space. It is home to a roster of promising young startups and a distinguished alumni group that are out in the marketplace employing lots of people. And as the Governor said, this is a great example of what we need a lot more of throughout the state. And so we're working very, very hard under the Governor's leadership to expand the kind of collaborative co-working spaces that young companies need to thrive and succeed. I also want to recognize Kathleen Coviello and our team from the EDA who run this facility and do so much and have been a big part of the effort to come up with the ideas like the Evergreen Fund that we're talking about today. The Governor mentioned that this has been the result of a process since we've been since I've been working for the governor, of thinking about how do we supercharge the innovation ecosystem. And when we saw the data, I remember the conversation, when we saw the data that said we'd gone from 5th to 15th and we lost venture capital investment over the last 10 or so years, the governor said what he just said. Out of the top 5 is you might as well be last, and we need a big idea to try and crack the code here. And so we worked hard to come up with this proposal that we do think is a big deal. It's a game changer, and it's not just money. Money's important, but these are high value strategic dollars that this Evergreen Fund would have to invest because they'd be tied to and come with partnership from large corporates. So you can imagine if you're a young biotech company and you can have a choice of, and you have the opportunity to work with New Jersey's great roster of large pharma companies, that is a huge competitive advantage. To be able to have, I won't name them by name, but some of the very large pharma companies and life sciences companies that we have here, the opportunity to partner for young companies is enormously powerful. And it is a real distinction between what other places may have to offer. And so we think this could have an outsized impact on our ability not just to attract people who have maybe young businesses today, but attract the founders who have big ideas that may be out there, and importantly, have resources to invest in young people who are in New Jersey right now, going to high school, going to grade school, who may someday be those founders and innovators, that they have an opportunity to build those businesses right here in New Jersey. Because the key to outsized job creation and to outsized job growth, both in other places and historically in New Jersey, is young companies growing and turning into large companies. That's where you get your biggest impact from a job creation perspective. And without this tool, we think we're we're fighting with one arm behind our back. And with this tool, we think we'd have a really substantially advantageous competitive offering that would distinguish us from other places. And the reason I think that is because our phone's already been ringing from people who have heard about this fund from places as far as California and Europe saying, what's this fund? How do we get involved? What does this mean? How do we get involved with it? And we're telling them as soon as we have the right to do this program, we think it's going to be really exciting. And so we're excited about the really significant impact we think this fund could have. And we're looking forward to working with the legislature to bring that to life, which is a helpful transition to Assemblyman Zwicker.
Hey, before Andrew gets in, well done, man. Thank you. Before Andrew, first of all, Tim, thank you for that. And I couldn't agree more with everything you said. Andrew's day job, Andrew's the smartest man in show business, by the way. So let me just say that. This is why I wanted to interject this. I know you agree with me. Andrew works at Princeton at the Plasma Physics Lab. That's a place that I've worked on and off over the years myself. That's not true. We'll get me there. I'll be lucky if I get a tour. But I'm looking at here. Albert Einstein, another guy who did time at Princeton, is staring at us as we're making these remarks, Andrew. I want to make sure that we get this right. So with that, a leader in the legislature, a guy who really gets the innovation economy, probably unlike anybody else I can think of in the state, honored to echo Tim's introduction, Assemblyman Andrew Zwicker.
Thank you. I had no idea that I'd be giving a plasma physics lecture as opposed to talking about the Evergreen Fund, but yes, it is Einstein. First of all, happy spring to everybody. It is the first day of spring. But thank you, Governor Murphy, for inviting me to speak today. This is a topic that is near and dear to me, both as a scientist and as a legislator. Governor, you've often talked about how New Jersey was Silicon Valley before there was a Silicon Valley, and I couldn't agree more. What began with innovation in manufacturing here in New Jersey, going back to the textile and silk manufacturing in Paterson, to the steel that was responsible for building the Brooklyn Bridge in Trenton, to the innovation of the 20th century that include the transistor, the radar, fiber optics, and a gas density switch that probably nobody knows about, used by NASA on the Apollo mission to the moon, invented by a New Jersey engineer in the 1950s named Beatrice Hicks, who was a trailblazer that was New Jersey through and through, one of New Jersey's great unsung heroes. But the point is that each of these and more have helped transform and shape the world we live in. But this world, as the governor mentioned, has changed. These transformative inventions that were produced in private laboratories, industrial laboratories, in places like New Jersey's own Bell Laboratories, where scientists and engineers who have received more than a dozen Nobel Prizes for their fundamental designs, these places are going away or don't even exist. Other states, as you heard, they've understood this and they've moved ahead of us. They've created an ecosystem where the private sector, the research universities, and the public sector work collaboratively and do so over the long term. For example, Massachusetts, for more than a decade, has transformed itself into a life sciences powerhouse. Pennsylvania has been doing these sort of investments for many decades. These states, when they do these investments, they look very carefully at the economic impact of this, the jobs created, the companies that are grown, and the return on investment is amazing. It's 2 to 1, it's 3 to 1, it's more. Last week in my Science, Innovation, and Technology Committee, where I'm fortunate enough to be the chair of that, we had a hearing on this idea of working together collaboratively, creating public-private partnerships that make sense for New Jersey, and the response was overwhelmingly positive from everybody who came to testify. In the fact, the message was really, what's taking us so long? And so, Governor, I want to thank you for your leadership. This Evergreen Fund is an innovative approach that will genuinely kickstart the New Jersey innovation economy. This idea of auctioning off tax credits and using these to provide the matching funds that we've heard about will create an ecosystem that's a win-win for everybody. The end result is a vibrant culture of investment in the companies of the future that will create high-quality, high-paying jobs, grow our economy, and position New Jersey as a national leader again in innovation. So thank you for having me today, and thank you, Governor, for everything you're doing.
Well done, man. Well said, as always. Love that. Thank you again, Andrew, and for everything, for being here today, for your leadership on the innovation economy, for your support and friendship. We'll take a couple of questions. It looks like many of our members of the press are hiding behind the cameras today, which is unusual. So, David, I see you back there, but anyone have any questions? Please.
Yeah, how much money are you putting into this, and is the goal necessarily to make money or to grow and retain these businesses?
Yeah, so the goal is not to make money. If we make money, we'll plow it back into the program, and I hope that we make money as opposed to not make money. But the overwhelming goal, without question, is to get these businesses, to get young people to come here, to stay here, entrepreneurs likewise, and to birth their companies here and to feel like they're in an environment unlike any other in the country. So that's the overwhelming objective. It's a $50 million per year piece over 5 years. Did I get that right? $60 million where we expect that will yield about 50. I apologize. Because when you auction tax credits historically, history will suggest you get about 90 cents on the dollar. So it's a $60 million program. You'd expect that you'd raise about 50. That would drop down alongside another 50 of VC money, and that combination would be then invested by venture capital professionals, all done. To pay the light bills, I'm sorry about that. All done with an eye toward investing in companies that have a New Jersey nexus. And that would be the notion. And again, it's a 5-year notion, just like our tax incentives across history and across the proposals that we have are 5 years as well. Catherine.
Where this is at in the legislature right now, do you plan on increasing the bill, and what's the latest?
So we've had good conversations. I mentioned that we sent our drafts over before Christmas, so several months ago. We've had generally very good back and forth. I don't want to speak for Andrew, may want to come up and give his opinion on this, but we've had good conversations. This is the hardest one of the 5 pillars to really get your mind around. I don't mean you personally, but one's mind around. And we're working on it. This is probably also the biggest game changer. The others will be important in their own rights. And again, many of them are extensions, I think better versions of what we've had in the past, but in many respects, new generations of what we've already had. This is a real new game changer. Is that fair?
Sure. I would just simply say part of the hearing that I mentioned in my remarks last week was to bring out what are any issues at all. And as I said, support is overwhelming. That comes from research universities, venture capital people across the spectrum. Massachusetts, for instance, has shown this is a huge win-win, and the governor talked about that. So I think we're good to go on the legislative side.
And again, it's the notion of rebooting the innovation economy, I think is a shared objective, not just by us, but with our legislative brothers and sisters in both chambers and leadership as well. Sorry.
Do you want to see this bill, you want to see this move alongside the tax credit legislation at the same time, correct?
Yeah, well, this would be one of the 5 pillars of the incentives, yes. So these are all June 30th realities. Justin.
The Select Oversight Committee is reviewing whether to.
This is on topic, I assume? Or? Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Sorry.
They're reviewing whether to expand its inquiry into the School Development Authority hiring. Haven't made a decision yet, but I'm curious if you have any reaction to that and whether you think that would be fair game for the committee to look at.
I have no opinion on that specific question. I would just repeat that long before this got into the press at the School Development Authority, we were already reviewing hiring and personnel practices. That review is ongoing, and I've promised. What's that? No, as I said, when we've got something to tell you, we'll let you know. It's ongoing. Thank you, David. I see you back there.
Governor, on green economies, where are you on whipping votes for marijuana legalization?
I saw that one coming a mile away, by the way. I just want you to know. In the cloud back there, I saw it. We're still not there yet. We're working it really hard in both chambers. It's going to take, as I've mentioned publicly, it's going to take each one of the leaders, myself, the Senate President, the Speaker, we've all got to be all in. There's just no other alternative. I have no reason to believe we're not, but it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a village in this case. And it's going to be very close in both chambers. I'm incredibly, it's not perfect, but I'm incredibly proud of the product, particularly as it relates to social justice, which is how I got into this to begin with. So let's put aside the jobs that will be created, which will be thousands and the billions of dollars of economic impact. We have the widest, as you've heard me say before, the widest white, non-white gap of persons incarcerated in America, and the biggest contributing factor is low-end drug offenses, either small-end distribution or possession. This gets at that in a big way in terms of expungement. It gets at, unlike any other state that's ever done this, it gets at folks who are currently incarcerated. There's a process, not just for expungement if you've already served your time, but if you're there at the moment. It's got real meaningful goals as it relates to minority ownership and or women and disabled vet ownership of licenses that will be directed by a commission. It's got particular zones that are largely urban, that in largely communities of color that have been particularly impacted by the war on drugs, so to speak, over the decades, that will have an extra added incentive. There are provisions for folks who don't have the full bore capital or track record, many of whom will be overwhelmingly in the communities persons of color or women. There'll be an on-ramp for them to be able to still get a license. So I'm incredibly proud of all of that, and it's come a long way. And I just have to remind everybody who's watching, we're not inventing marijuana. It exists. So the question is, do we abide by the status quo where our kids are completely exposed? This is largely a gateway drug because the guy in the corner goes like this and he's selling you everything, not just marijuana. The bad guys run the business and make all the money. It's unregulated, and the social injustices that have been built up over decades are not addressed. That's the reality today. We're not creating that or warning that that may happen. That is happening in New Jersey versus protecting our kids. 21 years and up, strictly enforced. The bad guys out of the business. We make the money. We regulate it. We control it, and all at the same time undo decades of social injustices. So I couldn't be more passionate, but having said that, this is going to be really close, and the Senate President, the Speaker, and I are going to have to lay it out completely to get this thing over the goal line.
And just follow up on that aspect of it, the people who count these numbers suggest that if you one it is that you need to pass this. Has the Senate President been helpful in that regard, or do you expect more from him?
I have no reason to believe that he hasn't been helpful. I'm likely going to be speaking with him this afternoon. Yeah, there are a number of senators, including 4 or 5, I think, in the South, as you mentioned, but there are other senators in other parts of the state that are not yet there yet. And so it's going to require all of us to get this, as I mentioned, to get this done. Some of us have a particular sphere of influence that's stronger here, there, or otherwise. We're all going to have to be there muscling this across. Catherine.
Have you gained any traction on the South Jersey lawmakers specifically in getting some support?
I don't know. It's too early to tell, and I'm not going to get into particular names. I'd rather keep it more general. But we're talking to everybody, no matter where you are geographically, no matter what party you're in, no matter which chamber you're in. We're turning over every single stone on this one. Last one. Thank you.
What can you do in terms of either sweet talking and horse trading? Do you think the votes that you need are gettable?
Do I think it's gettable? Yes. I'm a born optimist. I believe it's gettable. I wouldn't be throwing the amount of energy into this that I am if I thought otherwise. And again, it's going to require every bit of energy from the Senate President, the Speaker, and myself, as well as colleagues both in our office and in the legislative chambers to get this done. I'd say the biggest, and I wouldn't call it a sweetener because it's for the benefit of New Jersey societally. The big steps forward that have been taken in social justice has really caught a lot of people's attention. And I'm particularly struck not just in conversations with legislators, but also with advocates, and importantly, not just with New Jersey advocates, but with national advocates who are paying attention to this. Reverend Al Sharpton tweeted yesterday about a conversation that he and I had about how meaningful the social justice elements of this are. And so that's an example of something that's not a sweetener. It's doing the right thing. It's doing what we said we would do, which is we're putting our words and we're putting actions and meaningful laws in place that match our words. I want to thank the CCIT folks. Jim, thank you in particular for your great words. Andrew, thanks for your friendship, support, leadership on the innovation economy and beyond. Dr. Einstein, nice to see you. Tim Sullivan, thank you for your extraordinary leadership at the EDA. Council President, Councilman, Mayor, others here in the North Brunswick. I wish the state could run as well, Mac, as North Brunswick does. That's our goal when we wake up every day. To all the young folks here, to all the entrepreneurs, the game is changing in New Jersey. Let there be no doubt about it. This is the place that folks over the next number of years, if we could do this together, they're going to write about New Jersey as the place that's keeping and attracting the next generation of the innovation economy leadership. Thank you all.